Yesterday it was supposed to be a pretty brief day. Do labs, get hooked up to chemo that he takes with him in a carry case. Before you can get chemo, you have to have labs. Labs are a blood draw to make sure that your neutrophils, especially, and your white cell count are high enough to receive the chemo. So we got to chemo, and they had trouble. They didn't have any trouble accessing the port. They had trouble getting blood through the access. When you can't get blood through the access, this happened last time. I neglected to include you in that information. You have to get some fluids. So we got fluids. Fluids take time. Then they took several attempts at getting the access to give them blood. They finally got blood. Once they ran the labs, his hemoglobin was 7.7. Anything below 8 is critical. And his absolute neutrophils were too low. And they looked at his labs from his week after his disconnect last time, which I guess is the nadir for each of his types of chemo, and they were fine. So they're blaming the low numbers on his radiation. So that meant we could still get the chemo, but he was going to need blood, so he needs a transfusion. But the transfuse team in the afternoon on Fridays is all booked, so that means you can't get blood until Monday. And so I asked what signs to watch for over the weekend. They said weakness, dizzy, heavy labored breathing. He's had all of those for 2 days. So, in talking with the nurse who was going back and forth with the doctor, I decided that he should get the transfusion through the ER, which they said was the only way to get it sooner. But I can't go to the ER with him because we have radiation at 2:45, and it takes 4 hours to get the blood. So we got the fluids, we got the labs, we hooked up to the chemo, and we went out to lunch because we also need to go to Rite Aid to get Benadryl, because the last time he's had 3 transfusions until this one. And the last time he broke out in a rash on his chest and his back that lasted for 2 weeks. So they wanted him to take Benadryl before the transfusion. So I drove through McDonald's and got him a plain cheeseburger and a small chocolate shake. Sorry, I'm still sick. And and I ran in to Rite Aid to get the Benadryl, and he added to that list because he needed more Imodium and Tylenol and a prescription that they wrote for Lomodal in case he needs it, which is extreme diarrhea medication. And then we went to radiation, and they took us a little early, which was good. And then they wheeled us right over to the emergency room, where the doctor on call in the emergency room, or the doctor working in the emergency room, was a doctor that he knew, which worked out very well. So they had to do their own labs because that's how hospitals work. Although she copied the lab results, so she already knew what she'd be dealing with that I had from chemo. And it took more than an hour and a half to get type and crossed, maybe 2 hours. And while we were waiting, they asked him if he wanted some food, so he had some mac and cheese and some ginger ale and some coffee, which was nice of her. The blood finally arrived. The little nurse put it on speed dial for all intents and purposes. and he got his transfusion, and about 12 hours after I picked him up, I took him home. That's been the longest day so far.